Might seem like a controversial statement to many, but the West never planned for Ukraine to have a military victory against Russia in this war. The real war against Russia was the sanction war. And they expected that Russia was really a gas station masquerading as an economy. That's a phrase I've heard many Western officials say. So they expected that with the sanctions, a Russian economy would crumble, and therefore Russia would not be able to sustain the military fight against a NATO-trained Ukrainian army, and would be forced to the negotiation table within months of this war, and thereby forced to give up the Donbass, and probably the jewel, the holy grail of this war, which is Crimea. And if Russia lost Crimea, that would be a strategic defeat for Russia, as they would lose access to the Black Sea, which really allows them access to most of Europe. One of the key elements that assisted Russia in helping Syria defeat the proxy rebels of the CIA in 2015 was that Russia was able to sail ships down the Black Sea from Sevastopol and fire missiles on the rebels. In essence, the West never prepared or never anticipated that they would be at this point now, 3 years long into a war in which they have to supply Ukraine continuously with weapons. It is clear that it is the West who miscalculated, because as early as 2023, President Biden said in an offhand comment in an interview when asked by a reporter, "Why are you sending cluster munitions to Ukraine, which is a banned munition?" And he said, because they're running out of ammo.
President, any update on the cocaine?
Mr. President, cluster munitions, why now?
We've run out of ammunition.
They were out of artillery shells. And my friends, artillery shells is the god of war in all land wars. You can't win a land war without artillery. So the West does not have the weapons and does not have the military industrial complex to supply Ukraine for a long attrition war. It has always been a debate in my head and among many experts, at what point do you think the West lost this war? I would confidently say that they lost the war after the sanctions failed to cripple the Russian economy. At that point, they should have pulled back and realized they miscalculated, they misjudged Putin's alliances with China and India and the global South, and they mistakenly thought that if they cut off his clientele in Western Europe, that his economy would collapse. It failed, and therefore they needed to stop, pause, and prepare again, and come back later, perhaps in another decade, like they did in Syria. They lost the war, they maintained control of the oil fields in Syria, the proxy rebel groups still maintain positions on the outskirts of Syria, and they inflicted so much damage on the Syrian economy over the years with sanctions and inhibiting their oil imports, that when they were able to ally with Turkey in this recent offensive that toppled the Assad regime, it was because the country was literally bled dry. The Assad regime did not have sufficient resources to properly fund its army. The generals laid down their weapons, they did not fight, and a proxy army of maybe 30,000 well-equipped rebels ran through the entirety of Syria against the Syrian army that's supposed to have somewhere around 200,000 troops. They had 2 Russian bases. Russia had about 60,000 troops there. Proxy rebels were able to capture major city after major city with almost no resistance. That is how the West plans to fight. Weaken the economy and the military will collapse. That did not happen with Russia. So now we are seeing that President Trump has realized that they can't continue like this, because Israel is demanding a lot of weapons, and no great power can fight 2 great wars at the same time, especially when you're losing both of them. So Trump realizes he has to get out. It's desperate now, and he has to do it now before the majority of the Western public or the American public comes to the stark realization of the dire situation they are in, that the Ukrainian army is losing badly. Now, I know this. Most of my followers know this. But because the front line is moving relatively slowly, the Western media can still project an image of something like a stalemate, or that, the narrative that if Russia continues at this pace, it will take 5 years before they occupy all of Ukraine. But we know Russia is not interested in all of Ukraine. What America wanted, bring Russia to the negotiation table. Get Russia to pull out of the Donbass. and probably pull out of Crimea, in which case Ukraine will now have all of its territory, which will enable it to more quickly join NATO. Because NATO members are not going to vote to allow Ukraine to enter NATO when there are territorial disputes within the country. So as long as there are two independent sovereign regions in Donbass, the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic, who has declared their independence from Ukraine and are aligned with Russia, Ukraine will not join NATO. As long as Crimea has been annexed by Russia and Ukraine doesn't accept it, that's the thing. If they don't accept that Crimea is Russian and they still claim it's Ukrainian, then that's a territorial dispute. That prohibits Ukraine joining NATO. But that is secondary. The real goal that America sought with these sanctions in this war was to get access to Ukraine's rare earth metals. They can't do that if Russia is still in the Donbass and still has a land bridge. And the land bridge, by the way, is where the majority of Ukraine's rare earth resources are. Coal, lithium. Pokrovsk is a lithium hub. You have the Azovstal steel factory in Mariupol. I believe that's the second largest steel factory in all of Europe. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the second largest thermal nuclear power plant in all of Europe. There's another thermal power plant in Kurakovo. Lithium in Pokrovsk, coal, and all sorts of resources litter the Donbass region. And then you have Odessa, which is the port by which I believe 40% of the world's grain is shipped. This is a breadbasket, and Russia occupies the resource-rich regions. That is what America wants. But if they continue on this path initiated by President Biden in this losing war, and another one in Israel, they are going to collapse economically. So Trump wants to get out of this. He wants to make friends with Putin. And he's hoping, well, he's asking for these rare earth metals that I don't know how he's going to get because Russia is sitting on them. But the point of this video is to explain to you how poor the Western media reporting of this war has been. Most are completely clueless about what this war really is about. It is not about democracy and saving democracy in Ukraine. That is the propaganda narrative the West used for all the invasions. It is about weakening Russia, and it is about getting rare earth metals as we enter a new world order. So in essence, after the economic sanctions failed, everything after that has been a case of improvisation from the West, hysterical, impulsive improvisation, trying to snatch victory out of the jaws of defeat.